Alright guys, so it's absolutely no surprise that stock is horrendous. In fact, I think most people have been trying to put together gaming PCs recently and they're either hit with out of stock, and if you move down the lower tier on the stack, prices are absolutely atrocious. So what I did here was I actually went on Amazon, and I went on Newegg, and I went on various platforms, and I found a graphics card that I could buy at MSRP or below MSRP, and I actually came in below MSRP with, here for it. I guess you already see it over there. It's the NVIDIA GeForce GT 1030. And what I wanted to do today was look at if you bought a graphics, well, not a graphics card, but a processor, if you built a computer and you needed a graphics card to use it for now, while you waited for things to kind of normalize, well, if you bought a 1030, you're going to spend less than $100. If you buy like a 570 or a 1650 Super, or even a 1650 or a 5500 XT, or a 570, anything in those price ranges, they're in the mid $200, and that's just way too much for those cards. I really can't recommend those. Now, if you could find a 5500 XT 8GB for closer to 200, definitely go that over this. But what if you bought this? What kind of graphics performance are you looking at? You're definitely not going to look past 1080p because it's only got a 2GB frame buffer, and it is about as entry level as it gets. This particular model has a DisplayPort adapter and an HDMI, meaning that if you got a high refresh rate panel that uses DP, well, you can at least use your computer. But if you try to do any kind of gaming on it, what do you get? Well, we took the GT 1030, which features 384 CUDA cores at a boost clock of 1468 MHz with 2GB of GDDR5 on a 64-bit bus, resulting in 48 GB per second of memory bandwidth. We took this card and we put it on our usual test bench, so absolutely unbalanced. It's an a Ryzen 9 5900X with 32 gigs of DDR4 3600 MHz RAM with a PCIe Gen 4 SSD, and it may seem like complete overkill, but the idea here is, again, if you bought this card as a filler, literally just to hold the place and give you a display while you waited for graphics card prices to return, what kind of performance can you get? Well, so we took the card and we put it up against our test suite of games for higher end graphics cards. Of course, we did it at 1080p and 720p out at low settings. If there was a lowest, we didn't go there, we just stopped at low. We're gonna kick things off with Forza Horizon 4 at 1080p. You are breaking the 30 FPS barrier, and if you drop it down to 720p, you're getting closer to that 60, but you're still only at 47 FPS average with a 1% percentile at 31, which isn't a whole lot better than the 27 at 1080p, but it does keep you over that 30 FPS mark. Shadow of the Tomb Raider shows a very similar story, although you're looking at 22 FPS average at 1080p with a 36 FPS average at 720p. However, that 720p gives you 36 average, 34 on the 1% percentiles, results in a very smooth gaming experience, although not a very attractive one. Doom Eternal yields very similar results with 26 FPS average at 1080p and 46 FPS average at 720p with a 32 FPS 0.1 percentile. So you're going to get at least over a 30 FPS experience at 720p with this graphics card. What about Watch Dogs Legion, a more modern game, I guess you could say? Wow, yeah, 17 FPS at 1080p and 30 FPS at 720p. 23 FPS minimum, definitely pretty low there. Horizon Zero Dawn is very similar to Watch Dogs Legion. Neither one of these are what I would consider doable. Yeah, just skip that game entirely. Moving into Borderlands 3, this one surprised me a bit where the 1080p performance didn't break that 30 FPS barrier. However, 720p got you 50 FPS with the 40 FPS 1% percentiles. It's definitely playable. Again, ugly is all sin though. Now the last two games that we're going to look at actually yield you a fairly good experience if you want to play a game with this graphics card at 1080p. Now these are the kind of games that you'll want to lean to. If you get this card to hold over, these top-end AAA games are not going to be the games that you're going to want to be trying to play. Free-to-play games, older games, definitely pull out those retro-style games and enjoy those. There's a lot of enjoyment you can have here. Again, let's look at those games, starting with Total War Saga Troy. You're looking at a 57 FPS average at 1080p and over 100 FPS at 720p. Now this game at 1080p, low settings, is quite ugly, but you're playing this game for the strategy aspect. Everything you need to see is on screen, so you can still enjoy the game. Rainbow Six Siege, again, a competitive style, free-to-play, well, not free-to-play, but a competitive style game that is very inexpensive to get into. You're looking at right at 80 FPS average with the 64 on the 0.1 percentiles on low using Vulkan. Now those, to drop to 720p, you're going to get a very high refresh rate. Would I recommend going out and getting this card? That is definitely not what this video is about. It's simply what to expect if you were to get it, and then how to get the most out of it. Definitely stick to older titles, free-to-play titles, and you're going to want to stick to lower frame rates, but lower resolutions. However, if you're running like a 1440p panel, 720p goes into that 4 times, so like the pixel rate in every way, so it can at least still be a fairly crisp image without being super muddy. It's going to be a low resolution, so definitely pixelated. Now, if you got 4K panel and you're trying to drive this with a 4K panel, thankfully this model has a display port, so you can get that full refresh rate out of 4K, but 1080p and 720p both equally go into 4K, again resulting in not a super jaggedy look. Now a 1080p panel is going to be quite ugly. You're probably going to run these games at 540p and let them fill out the pixels like an integer scaler would in a much more linear fashion. So these cards are definitely not useless. They're just not high-end gaming cards, and you can't expect that from them. Again, this was just a fun video. I thought we would do is what would happen if we bought the only graphics card that we could find at MSRP right now, and what do you get out of it? Because right now, everything is so jacked up, cards like this are starting to make a little bit more sense as far as at least being a placeholder for less than $100. Otherwise, you're going to be spending well over $200 mark. Let us know what kind of deals you found recently. How are you making it through this GPU drought? Are you going and buying older graphics cards, or are you just kind of working with what you have? What you have, let us know. If you're using an integrated graphics, that's really interesting. Love to hear from you guys. And while there's no link in the description below because there is no associated article with this video, feel free to like and subscribe and follow along for more content.